Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. Bex here today to share 10 books that I would really like to get to in the year 2026. I feel like I say this every year, but I don't keep the number of books to match the 25, 26 of the year because I don't read enough for that. So I just stick to 10 because that's a solid number. It helps guide me throughout the year without completely restricting me because yeah, I usually read between 30 and 35 books a year at this point in my life. So yes, these are all books that I own. That's kind of the caveat of this, is that they have to be books that are on my TBR bookshelf already, and they're books that I know I really want to get to, or I'm just kind of feeling drawn to at this moment, and hopefully that feeling continues throughout the year. So the first book that I would like to get to is another installment in the Royal Diaries series. So I have a few of these on my shelf that I haven't read yet. This is the one that I've now had the longest of the bunch, so I would like to get to it next. This one in particular is Lady of Chiao Kuo, Warrior of the South. This takes place in southern China, AD 531. And this is a special edition. It's a little bit bigger. Well, not a little, it's like double the size of most of the other ones in this series. And it's written by Laurence. Here's the end pages, by the way. They all have really pretty end pages. And yeah, as I said, this one's written by Laurence, and he's actually an author that I'm aware of. Like, he's a well-known children's author, so maybe that's why this is considered a special edition, because it's a bit bigger and they had a pretty notable person writing this story. I remember seeing this one back in the day, like when I was little and originally reading these stories. I don't recall ever having picked it up though, so I'm considering this as like a new to me read. If you're not aware of this series, they have a number of books that follow famous women from back in the day, usually princesses or queens of some sort, and you get to get a snippet of their story of when they were around like middle grade age. So oftentimes like 11, 12, sometimes it goes up to like 18, but most of the time it's kind of around that age. These books are sort of middle grade reads, and I read a number of them from the library when I was younger, and then now that I'm a bit older, I rediscovered them. I found one of them at a thrift store, and that sort of reignited my interest in trying to get my hands on all of them, and I have been just finding them in thrift stores over the last couple of years, and that's been really fun to do. So that was this. It was a thrift store find, and I'm excited to dive into this one and see what it's like. The next book that I want to get to also does revolve around war, and that is All Quiet on the Western Front, and that is by Erich Maria Remarque. His name always trips me up because Erich sounds very German, Maria sounds Spanish, and then Remarque sounds French. So I don't know like what pronunciation to try to do with his name, but this is one that is very famous. I have seen the more modern film adaptation of it, so I do know the general story of the book. But when I found this at a thrift store a few years ago, I really wanted to get it because I absolutely love this cover, and it is a book that has kind of been in the back of my mind for a while as something I would like to try to read. It's not particularly long. This is a book about the horrors of war. It follows these German schoolboys that are really encouraged to sign up and fight during World War I. And of course, they're all gung-ho, full of patriotism, and then they get to the front and they see just how absolutely miserable and horrible war is. So this is a modern classic, hence why it's in this special vintage classics edition. And this is technically not part of my 10 books that I want to read, but I also have another book called Cowardice by Chris Walsh, which looks at the history of cowardice in the military specifically, but also comparing it to like films and stories and things like that. And I just thought that it would be interesting to read All Quiet on the Western Front and then pick this one up as well. I'm starting off with all my tiny books on the list here. So next, I would really like to try Wind, Sand, and Stars by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. This is the author that wrote The Little Prince, which I have not read, but I am aware of it. And this is a collection of stories about Antoine's time flying. He was very much into flying planes, and this is like the 1920s, so when flying was particularly dangerous, and he was not great at always doing those safety checks that you should have done. So he got in a fair amount of crashes in his lifetime, and he also flew these mail routes in Africa and in South America, and so some of those stories are in here. And then there's also a famous crash that he was involved in, like a kind of a survival story, and that is in here as well. And that just sounded really interesting to me. There's actually a few other books in this Penguin Modern Classics edition. They're on the back here. So he has 2 other flight related books. And so if I enjoy this one, I can check those out as well. But yeah, I just randomly found this one and thought it sounded really cool, and I think it'd be interesting to read something from him. And then maybe I'll try the Little Prince after, just as like a little taster, because that's kind of like the one everyone's read. I really would like to try to read it in French, but from what I understand, the like tense, the verb tense that it's written in is kind of confusing. And like, you know, I understand some French to some degree, but it's still a very basic level. So apparently it might be a bit challenging if you're just deciding to pick it up. But yeah, maybe I will after I read this. Starting to get into the chunkier books on my list. This one I have known about for years, and so many people around me have read it, and I'm finally hoping to get to it this year. That is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. This has become very popular since it was published. There is a film adaptation of it as well, and I would really like to read the book and then watch the film and maybe do a book to movie comparison if I feel that it warrants it. This is a very famous piece of nonfiction about Henrietta Lacks and her cells, HeLa cells, which have been used in a lot of scientific research since they were taken from her body in the 1950s without her consent. Her family was not aware that this happened. They were not financially compensated, and these cells are incredibly famous in the science world. That's not a world that I'm a part of, but I know people who have said that they have worked with HeLa cells before, which is just crazy to me. The fact that these cells never died, I mean, that just kind of blows my mind. So I really would like to get the detail side of this story finally. Going back to some middle grade reading, I would really like to read the next book in the American Girl series that I've been making my way through. The next one on that list would be Kirsten. So this is Kirsten's story collection. I am currently making my way through Josefina's story collection. Kirsten is next in the timeline. And what's nice about this is Kirsten was the doll that I was originally obsessed with back in the day. So I have a Kirsten doll. It's at my parents' house because I don't really have room for it in my apartment. But yeah, so my doll is there, but I brought the story collection with me so that I can read it sometime in 2026 after I've wrapped up Josefina's story collection. So Kirsten is a Swedish immigrant, and she comes to Minnesota with her family, and her stories fit the same mold as all the other American Girl stories, where there's 6 of them, and you have like the Meet Kirsten story, you have a school story, a Christmas story, summer story, so on and so forth. So this will actually be the first one in this project that's a reread for me, because Felicity came first, and then Josefina, and I had never read either of those before. But way back in the day, I did read Kirsten. I barely remember anything about her stories because it was that long ago. So I'm looking forward to kind of being refreshed on that and seeing like what it was about it that I loved when I was a lot younger. Next, I have another very serious read, and that is Highway of Tears, a true story of racism, indifference, and the pursuit of justice for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls by Jessica McDiarmid. This is a Canadian book about the Highway of Tears, which is a remote highway in British Columbia, and a lot of Indigenous women and girls, as it says in the subtitle here, have gone missing on that highway, have been found dead after being on that highway or around that highway. And so it is a thing that I am aware of since I came to Canada and really started living here full time. And I want to understand it a little bit better. The author grew up near this highway, and so it was very much a part of her life for many years. And so I think she will be able to provide a particular perspective about all of that. And I know it'll be a difficult read, and I'm sure it will piss me off, but I really do want to learn and understand more about this. This next book has a very pretty cover. It is Into the Planet, My Life as a Cave Diver by Jill Heinerth. Hopefully that shininess isn't too bad and you can appreciate this beautiful photo. I did check, and the photo was provided by the author. So this is either her there herself, or she took this photo, I would imagine, but very cool. And this is Jill's memoir about being a professional cave diver, which is something that I consider extremely scary, but I would absolutely love to read a book about that. It's obviously a very dangerous career, and it is a male-dominated field as well, so I'll get to hear about her perspective of not only doing and being interested in doing this very dangerous thing, but also just the trials and tribulations of being a woman in this field. Also just sort of the mental fortitude that you need to be able to do something like this, knowing you're going into these dark places with limited oxygen, just like, I start to get a little sweaty just thinking about it. This is actually the first book that, when I was building this list for 2026, this was the first book that I grabbed off my shelves, so I very much want to read this one. The third to last book is one that many of you will recognize. It's quite popular on BookTube, and that is Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. I've had this one for a few years now, and I keep pulling it out to read it, and then I just don't quite get to it. It goes back on the shelf, etc. It might have even been on a past 10 books I want to read for whatever year list, maybe, but I know there's been multiple times where I've grabbed it, brought it with me somewhere, and I just never got to it. So this year I really want to make sure I get to it. It's not even that long of a book, and I constantly hear great things about it. It is a dark book. It's kind of like a little bit of dad fiction is one of the ways I've heard it described. This follows two fathers who have some dark pasts. Their sons, who they don't necessarily have great relationships with, ended up marrying each other, and then their sons were murdered. And so these fathers want to get revenge in the name of their sons, even if they weren't necessarily close to them and didn't really agree with their lifestyle. There's still that family honor and love there, it sounds like. And so I imagine this will be gritty and get pretty graphic to some degree, but I just think that's such an interesting plot. And like I said, I've heard really good things, so I really need to get to this one this year. This one I believe is the chunkiest book on my list. It's about 550 pages, but it's a full-size hardback, and that is The 12 by Justin Cronin. This is the second book in the Passage trilogy. I read the first book a few years ago after having it on my bookshelf for years, and the first 250 pages were a bit of a slog, but after that, because I think that one was like 700 pages, so it was longer than this one. After that, it became a really gripping post-apocalyptic story, and I loved it. So I knew when I finished it that I really wanted to read the next book. And then I ended up finding this one this year at a library book sale, so that was exciting. And it seems like with this one, we are also going to be jumping between different timelines. This is going to follow some people at the very beginning of everything falling apart, and then it also seems like we might get to follow some of the characters that we were following at the end of the first book, the characters that I was really getting attached to. So hopefully that is the case, because I really liked reading about them, but I'm also very curious to follow people right as things were falling apart. So hopefully this doesn't have 250 pages of meh in it before it gets really good, and it's just really good from the start. The final book on this list is a coffee table book, and it's been sitting on my shelf for a little over a year. I keep seeing it, it's calling to me, but it's really inconvenient to bring it anywhere. It's not something you can just carry around with you, slip into your bag. So you kind of have to read it at home and make an effort to pick it up when you're here, and that is Green, The History of a Color by Michel Pastoureau. So this follows the history of the color green from its first appearances many hundreds of years ago, and also up to present day, more or less, and then also talking about how the meaning of the color green has changed over time. Sorry, I'll try to get that so it isn't so shiny from the from the window light. But yes, so we're getting not only paintings and examples of green throughout history, but we're also talking about how the meaning of that color has changed, and maybe modern day individuals are interpreting the color incorrectly based on how it would have been used back in the day, and how those meanings are changed, which is very interesting to me. Like I understand how that could be a thing, but I want to see how it relates to this color. And I did originally get this book because, one, I love the cover of it, but also because green is my favorite color. So I would love to learn more about it. And like all of the end pages are different because this is part of a series. And then they just have these, yeah, like really beautiful pages. I'll get to look at a lot of pretty artwork too, so I'm looking forward to that. It's nicely formatted. The font is like a decent size to read, so it shouldn't be like a slog to get through this or anything. But yeah, so I felt it was time to add this to the list to really get me to actually pick it up. Those are the 10 books that I would really like to get to in 2026. If you have read any of them, or if you would like to read any of them, let me know in the comments below. As always, links are down there as well. You can check those out if you feel so inclined. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you later.